All right, let's get our Facebook groups in here before it's officially time to go. Drink that coffee while it's loading up. Shout out to Patrick. And welcome in, everybody. It is Thursday morning, the 16th. We're halfway through March, and that means we're, I guess halfway through the off season. I don't know. We're free agencies are pretty much already come and gone, right? But time for Broncos for breakfast. I'm Nick Kendall, joined by Scott Kennedy. Scott, how are things in Atlanta? Has it started to warm up there a little bit yet?
I think it'll warm up to rain and then it'll get cold again. So
Okay.
it's
March.
in the drop down into the 20s again. I mean, that's chilly considering 85 degrees, 87 degrees a couple of weeks ago. So it's definitely heating up on the free agency market, that's for sure. May have cooled off a little bit towards the end of the week, but we got off to such a fast start. Now we can kick back and look at some of the other moves that are going to be made. And we've talked a lot about Sutton and Jeudy maybe moving before the draft. There's still smoke there, right? So we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It just keeps coming round and round again. Before it was like, oh, maybe this last coaching staff wasn't such a fan of Jerry Jeudy, and but this front office, they love Courtland Sutton. Well, now Courtland Sutton's been rumored a lot to move, and Jerry Jeudy. So we'll see what happens. It's interesting, and it won't go away. Just like we won't Akey Dragon coming in saying make it happen, Broncos. Akey's pro trade, so I feel like that's pretty. You're kind of standing alone there, Akey. I'm not pro or against, but I feel like most people, melt down a little bit talking about trading Jerry Jeudy specifically. But we'll get into the merits of it and why it would make some sense. Mike Gibbons in here. Good morning, Nick, Scott, and Broncos country. You got Jeremy Sean coming in saying, morning, boys. Morning to you, Jeremy. Saying the wide receiver talk is a little weird if you ask me. If Courtland and Jerry stay, they will be out to prove something. Yeah, I think you're certainly correct in that. Kevin Gray, morning, everyone. Nick and Scott, really happy about free agency. Finally, someone fixing the core. Hard not to be hyped. Denver Broncos for life, MHH for life. Jesse Hilborn, good morning. Good to see you. 42 days until the draft. 43 for the Broncos. Yeah, you're right, Jesse. Mark Hoynack, good morning, Broncos country. In his opinion, trading Jerry Jeudy would be the stupidest move ever. Well, we're coming
not
off
ever, but I think it would be a stupidest move. I wouldn't agree with it. Again, it depends on what you get back. One of our Chiefs fans came in and was like, a top 40 pick for Jeudy. LOL, I'm an idiot.
Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, it's like, well, then he's not for sale. It's pretty simple. That's what we want. If you think that's laughable, don't trade it to us. That's fine. I see that in soccer all the time. Because you actually buy players. So you put them you buy out their contracts. You see a monetary value on their contract. And they say, West Ham wants $50 million for that guy. That's ridiculous. Are they insane? No, they don't want to sell him. It's pretty easy. It's not that hard to figure out.
Yeah. West Ham just started Ted Lasso season 3 last night, so we're anti-West Ham.
I'm kind of probably going to let that go a little bit, so I haven't yet. So no talk, no Ted Lasso. I guess it's probably one of those. I hadn't done that since really Game of Thrones. I'm going to have to watch it live because everybody talks about it. So I can't I like to let a couple episodes build up and then watch a month.
Yeah.
But probably can't do that with this one because enough people talk about it that I'll miss out.
Too much of a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
RJ coming in here, $4.99 super, kicking us off on the YouTube side of things today. Thank you so much, RJ. Saying morning, y'all. Good morning to you. It says, I know there's been a lot of talk about signing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson Jr., but I think it'd be more beneficial to sign a good edge like Za'Darius or a cornerback. It depends on what the contract is. Maybe the Broncos don't have the money to sign a good edge or cornerback. But I think I agree with you. Also, the interesting thing here is James Palmer was on Good Morning Football a couple days ago, and they asked him 2 players on the Broncos that you expect to really burst onto the scene next year. And he listed Caden Stearns as one of those 2 players, talking about how much Vance Joseph and this defensive staff are just over the moon excited to work with Caden Stearns. Well, you go out there and you pay Chauncey Gardner-Johnson Jr. big money. That doesn't really say that to me. So unless you're thinking he's going to be moving to more of a full-time slot kind of position that he was more with the Saints. So I don't know. I mean, Broncos need good players on the defensive side of the ball. You need depth. You need versatility. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson would help. But I don't disagree with you. Edge and cornerback would also be good avenues to go after.
Yeah, if you're talking about where does this team, again, all things being equal, and it might not be that way. Different values for positions. I might be able to get a better player in the secondary for less money than I could an edge, and I'm going to go with the better player if I can. instead of just filling a need. And I'll go with a jag at edge if I can get a really good player in the back instead of a overspend. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That but on the whole, I agree with you. You look at this Broncos team, you're like, okay, where were they hurt more, in the front seven or the secondary? The front six, however you want to say it, the front five or the back seven, which hurt? Some might argue linebacker. Honestly, that that
Is Ethan here?
the athleticism at the linebacker position may have hurt more than any of those. But safety doesn't overly scare me. Even you see Kareem Jackson was okay. He wasn't a plus guy. He's played $2 million last year. You got what you paid for. You probably got more than you paid for there. You can never have enough corners. We talk about that all the time. You can never have enough pass rush. Talk about that all the time. So I'd agree with you. But if you've got a chance to bring in a difference maker at a bargain price, you don't pass that up either.
Yeah. And again, it's kind of weird. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson Jr. for the Saints played more of a dime slot kind of position where he'd come down and play that second level of the defense a lot. And then last year with the Eagles, he played mostly deep safety position. So where his role would be in this Vance Joseph defense maybe could change things. Maybe you're thinking about playing three safeties a lot. What does that mean with Kwan Williams? What does it mean with Damari Mathis? I don't know. Will be interesting to follow that, but the Broncos do seem to be linked to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson Jr. and looking to bring in some secondary players. Speaking of secondary, though, I'd keep an eye right now with where the Broncos are at in the third round and how they've attacked free agency. You can go any which way, and I think cornerback, based on the names that I've heard the Broncos have been talking with, based on some connections from covering the combine for a number of years, cornerback's a position they're doing a lot of work on right now for the guys that are in that range. So keep an eye out for that. Michael Ronquillo,
we're always keeping an eye out for us. That's for sure,
yeah.
Mike. Thank you, sir.
Big time. Good morning, Nick and Scott on Broncos for Breakfast. Go Broncos and buck 'em. Buck you too, Michael. We appreciate you coming in. It's always a good time. We also got our guy Colton Ensley coming in with the angry-looking Jesus there in the picture, saying, let's go. Finally able to see it live again. Love the whole MHH crew, but especially Nick and Scott. Well, thank you, Colton. That's really nice of you to say. We appreciate that, and we're glad that you could join us today. Mark Hoynak, Broncos will be a formidable opponent once again. So far, all positives of need and also identity pieces. I mean, this is something you just keep coming back to it. They're signing tough players, grinders, kind of almost like, not just good players, but players that all fit a mashing identity, especially on the offensive side. I mean, you bring in Ben Powers, you bring in Mike McGlinchey, you bring in man hurts. You bring in the fullback whose name's escaping me right now.
Michael Burton.
You bring in
a 6 foot, 245 pounds of 8-year fullback. If you can make it in the league as a fullback for that long, you're just built different. I mean, you just are. Those guys are freight trains.
Yep. And then even on the defensive side of the ball, physicality. Zach Allen, a physical young player. Alex Singleton. Seems like they're really bringing in a lot of people who are, like definitely the mean business folks. And we keep hearing Sean Payton like, oh, last year Broncos got to enjoy, really easy training camp and off season. And Sean Payton, he's going to grind. Yeah, it was soft. And now Sean Payton's going to come in and it's going to be, that 80s, 90s kind of training camp, Bill Parcells style, where it's going to be physical and demanding and long and tough within the parameters of the what the NFLPA allows them to do.
But I remember I said, last year I used the word soft and someone came in, you wouldn't say that to his face. I'm like, I didn't say it about anybody specific. I said this team was soft, and I would say that to someone. If I came up, Dalton Reisner, I said, he asked me, what do you think about our team last year? I said, I thought you guys looked soft. He'd say, we were. He'd agree. They would agree. I wouldn't say, Dalton Reisner, you are soft. I'm not stupid. But I might say the royal we. That's the team. I said it for 2 years. The team got bullied in the trenches. So what are you doing? You're bringing in some bullies. Thank you.
Yeah, some physical players. We'll see if they work out. You never know until hindsight. There's a tweet that I absolutely love that says like it's reaping and sowing, and like the reaping stage, yes, yes, let's go. And then the sowing, crap, this sucks. So right now the Broncos are in the reaping stage of free agency. We'll see a couple years from now if they enter the sowing, if some of these deals don't work out.
The draft and free agency, this is the hopeful phase. I talk about it all the time. One of my favorite movies and the theme around it is hope was Shawshank Redemption. My daughter's middle name is Hope. I was a big Greek mythology buff. The only fate that did not escape Pandora's box was hope. It's what drives us all every day. This is the time for that. If you don't have any hope for this team, You're miserable. Well, don't be miserable. Have some hope. This is a good time. This is the fun time.
Yeah.
When you're like this, when you're sitting back and watching and your team's not doing anything, then you're like, meh. You know, even if you're coming off a playoff season, like our team's pretty good, but everybody else is making all these moves. That FOMO starts kicking in.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I think after the whole Russell Wilson trade, I'm guarded as all get out. Before I want to see what the product looks like before getting too hyped about it. But there's no doubt the Broncos have a vision and a type of player and a type of identity they're trying to build, and that's something. I mean, we talked about it since we've done this show, Scott. What is the identity of this team? Who are they trying to be? Every single free agency move. I mean, everybody's pulling in the same direction now, and that seems you have an alignment between the coaching staff, the front office, a vision, and that's a good thing for this team. Diamond Rattler saying, boom, let's go. Albert Knoppers, good morning to you. Good to see you. We got Dr. Van Nostrand saying, I hope they keep Jerry for the long haul. We'll see. His name keeps coming up. And our guy, Rob Bucksbaum, coming in saying, morning, gentlemen. With all the activity we lost in our comp pick from Draymond, is it August yet? Broncos for breakfast. Once they signed McGlinchey, it was over. And I think like 3 of the top 10 comp picks that are going to be divvied out in 2024 are picks that the Broncos signed. Now, granted, maybe that's changed since then because like Orlando Brown and whatever. That one probably was canceled out by Jawan Taylor's signing. So I don't know, but I know that like I think McGlinchey is going to send San Francisco a 3rd round pick and 2 4th-round picks going out. One to the Cardinals for Zach Allen, one to the Ravens for Ben Powers.
Yep.
So Broncos did not play the comp pick game, and
they went the let's go get good players game.
Yes,
I prefer the latter.
The comp pick game is really good when you are in a position where you have too many good players that you let go of those B tier players, and because you can't sign them because you're already signing your A tier guys.
That's just kind of the rich getting richer, because I can take that whole sentence and squeeze it down. You're in a good position when you've got too many good players. End. If that's your problem, we've got too many good players, you are in a good position. And I was so profound that I froze Nick. So let's get down to Doug Raquel here, coming in with some stars. Says, good morning from Albuquerque. Don't you think we are better off now than if we had Rodgers and Hackett? Maybe. You don't know. You don't know. That would be interesting. I think, excuse me, they would have worked together a lot better. That's a great question, Doug, coming in with some stars. I think they would have worked together a lot better, for sure. I think the defense was okay. The offense would have been better. Again, you couldn't have been any worse. But the fact that Rodgers and Hackett had some trust in one another and, had worked together in the past, that whole dynamic would have been better for everybody. So I'm not willing to say you're in a better position because you're coming off a 5-win season, and I think you probably could have been a playoff team last year with Rodgers at quarterback and a different dynamic and a different power structure there, unless he comes in and takes over. But again, I just feel like, one, Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback. I don't think that's a big statement there. No. And two, the dynamic of everybody would have worked together. The stuff you practice is the stuff you actually try and take to the field. So I don't know. I think that's a great question, though. We'll never know. We'll never find out. Would have been interesting, but I think, my number one choice for turning this team around all winter has been Sean Payton. I think he was the best available coach, and you got him. You've got plenty of money to spend. You've got a good core of talent that's not too far removed from saying we're a quarterback away. Okay, Russ wasn't good last year. Nobody was. Can you get Russ back to being a plus quarterback in this league? Then let's go to work.
Yeah. Sliding doors, right? Like what if the Broncos didn't trade up and get Paxton Lynch, and instead they couldn't get up and Dallas takes him, and the Broncos end up taking Chris Jones and Dak Prescott that draft class? Or let's say the Broncos miss out.
Hypotheticals are fun.
I know,
they're fun. Right? You won't ever get a coach to answer that.
No.
But, I think they're fun. That's why we're here, is to have those discussions. Yep. And Doug, I think that's a great question. I appreciate you.
Yeah, we'll never know. Would Aaron Rodgers be still a Shailene? Is he still a Shailene Woodley? I don't know. I'm really tired of Aaron Rodgers.
A shaved woolly? What'd you call him?
Shailene Woodley, isn't that her name?
I don't know what that is. I don't pay attention to that stuff.
Okay.
That off the field drama, I just don't care.
She's
I
an
pay
actress.
attention to none of it.
Well, it's I have family and friends who are Packer fans, and you kind of see that. It's also, I think, looked up Aaron Rodgers so much last year that now the algorithm thinks that I want to know everything about him. So maybe I need to mute it. Greg Smith, not, but I still appreciate the stars in the question. That's fine on here. Greg Smith, good morning, Broncos for breakfast. Good to see you, Greg. We
Coming back with
appreciate.
the emojis. Thank you, Greg. You were slipping there. I think you need to step up your game just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And doesn't need to step it up. Aussie Wombat coming in from across the world. Hi from Perth, Western Australia. I
Tomorrow
think
there.
yes, probably. But it seems to me, Sutton, if you got a fourth for him, you might be lucky. But JJ's not worth less than a first rounder or 2 seconds. Yeah, man, I don't know if I'd trade Sutton without a top 75 pick personally. But I know that the Broncos seem pretty eager to move him. So we'll see. You can move some cap from him. You get a bunch more young, cost controlled players that can help out the belly of your roster, your special teams. Some of that blood in there. But like went through it yesterday, Scott. You probably saw it on Twitter. The Broncos get a bunch of day 3 picks for Courtland Sutton. Well, how have we done in the 5th round? If you look at the players with those picks, a bunch, fourth or fifth round picks, that sounds great. But then you look at the players. I mean, the only one that's really been a good pick so far for the last 2 seasons, and it's still early. Obviously, got to add that caveat, but you have Caden Stearns, good pick. That's a good 5th round pick, even though he's missed half the games
I
in
was
his
gonna say, but
NFL
he still
career.
hasn't done a whole lot.
No, but for 5th round, there's been flashes. There's hope for him. Jamar Johnson, gone. Last year, the Broncos took Delarian Turner-Yell, 1 pick before Tariq Woolen. God damn it. One pick before
You haven't
Tariq
thrown a
Woolen.
GD in a while.
Uh,
Let's not get us in too much trouble here.
yeah, that one hurts. But Delarian Turner-Yell, Montreal Washington, who the Broncos signed as special teamers yesterday, looks like he's going to replace him already. And then Luke Wattenberg, who was probably the worst offensive lineman the Broncos fielded last season. So like trading Courtland Sutton for a bunch of picks, I guess it's more just lottery tickets and young players. But so far, the 5th round returns have been pretty poor. Most teams don't hit on 5th round picks, but you've had options there and you haven't hit them.
Yeah, I would look, one of the other teams that we cover, the Atlanta Falcons, and say, how about Tyler Algier in the 5th?
Yeah.
And how about Taquan Graham in the 5th?
Yeah.
And if you're going to go special teams, Avery Williams in the 5th. So those were 3 nice players. One I think and he started 30 games as Ade Ogundeji, is another 5th round pick. Those guys are forced into play because the team was so bad. But they turn out to be some pretty good players. So you can, but going back to that and those were big stars, by the way, from Daniel. We haven't shown Daniel yet. We will show Daniel. But the question, that was Aussie Wombat.
Yes.
Coming in, talking about 4th round pick. If you're only getting a 4th round pick for Courtland Sutton, it's because of the contract. Because he's getting paid a lot of money. He's got a $14 million base. Normally, when you see the total compensation, it's a low base along with your salary, with your signing bonus. He's got a high base. It's a $14 million base. You can get past this season. I really think you hold on to him for 1 more year. You get more in return from a draft because his contract is better, 1. And 2, you get more relief from his contract because you've used him for a year and you've eaten away some of that signing bonus, some of that dead cap money. So I said it last night. I'll say it again, and then we'll say hey to Gary, Nick. If you trade Courtland Sutton this year, it's because Courtland Sutton and the Denver Broncos are not seeing eye to eye. It's not to do with financials and his play, as opposed to one of them or both of them wants a change. I'm convinced of that, Nick.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. The one thing that would be going against it, you would lose years of control. That somebody could argue that makes him less valuable, but the cap hit drops, so maybe that's negligible or
you're
even
going to resign him anyway. If you're going to make a trade for him, you're probably going to resign him. Years of control. I don't care about his years for control when he's at 14 million. He's expensive. So I'd be more interested in the player, and the player is worth more than a 4th round pick. Much more.
Yeah, without a doubt. Gary Palmer, $9.99, saying, good morning, Nick and Scott. Just wanted to say thank you for laying down some knowledge. Well, I can't speak to that myself, but we appreciate that you think that, Gary. I'm better fan for it. Go Broncos, MHH for life, and hashtag Buckham. Buck you too.
Thank you for
always
the support,
appreciate
Gary.
That. Yeah, that's
you're staying warm.
Yeah, I hope you're doing well, Gary. We always really do appreciate you. Daniel Swofford coming in.
These were the big stars from Daniel, so thank you. Saw him coming. I prematurely starred there, so thank you, Daniel.
You did what? No, he's concerned about the defensive line. Would bringing back Shelby Harris be the best move at this point? I'd have to go through some of the defensive linemen available. I mean, Shelby Harris is out there. I know Matt Ioannidis is also out there. He had a really good season for the Panthers last season. There's some good, cheapish veterans out there. Congrats also to Deshaun Williams signing a contract with the Carolina Panthers. A good deal for him.
Okay, that's official. Okay, I hadn't seen that one.
Saw that came out yesterday. At least I believe. Somebody in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but I definitely saw that come through. But the Broncos, I think they could definitely use some more defensive line. I would like somebody that comes in that's a veteran contract that you can move on from easily if one of Matt Henningsen or Owazarike step up. It's one of those things because you have those 2 draft picks last season, and typically defensive linemen, especially day 3 defensive linemen, if they are going to hit, it's going to take a couple of seasons. Maybe one of those guys takes a big step next year. So I'd like to have a little bit of flexibility with that next interior defensive lineman, unless you can get a good player on a good deal. And bringing Shelby Harris back for, $2 to $4 million over 2 years. And I don't know if that's disrespectful, and I'm just saying that's kind of the ballpark that I'm looking for to pay would be a good move.
Yeah, it's funny. Spot Rack has. I'm like, where is Owazarike? He's listed as a defensive end, which could be true.
3-4.
But he's an interior defensive line and a 3-4 defensive end. Yeah, I'm with you on this one, Daniel. We've talked about it a lot, and I don't think that Mike Purcell's all that expensive. $3.5, $4 million, I think, is about right for him.
Yep.
For having he's almost like a specialist, right? For what he does, I need a run stuffer again, show up and be strong in the middle. That's like a specialist. How much are you willing to pay a specialist? Ask your punter, ask your kicker. I 2 years ago, there was some talk about, Mike Purcell this and Mike Purcell that. I'm like, he's making less than your punter and your kicker. What are you expecting? I mean, this is a nose guard in there. You're getting value there, and I still think you are getting value there, even at $4 million. But yes, Daniel, I agree with you. Interior DL is someplace you want to beef up a little bit. We've seen the Broncos, when someone pins their ears back and says, we're going to run it right at you, they have trouble stopping them.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, right now you have Mike Purcell, you have DJ Jones, and you have Zach Allen, an inside-outside kind of player. Was somebody earlier asked about adding edge rusher to the team. Sure, that'd be great. You have an inside-outside player. I feel better about the bevy of options, not like superstars in my opinion, but the bevy of options that you have at edge in the depth department compared to that you have on the interior defensive line right now, just because we don't know enough about Owazarike and Matt Henningsen. So bringing in another interior defensive lineman, somebody who can either be like a 5 technique reducing down to a 3 technique type, rather than, a 0-1 or a 1-3, kind of like a DJ Jones. Sorry, I'm throwing around a bunch of numbers to you guys. It's like that Friends episode Scott likes to reference. I'm talking about the techniques. So if you guys are curious, hit me up on Twitter. I can send you a graphic of the alignments of defensive linemen. That would make some more sense. But somebody who's maybe, a 290 to 310 pounder who can play that 3-4 defensive end or kick in and be a 3 technique and 4-3 is a position that I think this team could still use to supplement the defensive line and make it so that Zach Allen isn't your pure 4-eye 3 technique if you want to go different, heavier packages out there. Mandingo Dan. Go ahead, Scott.
No, I agree with you. I want to see Allen. If he's inside, it's for pass rush. It's 3rd and long. Otherwise, I want to see him outside. Yep. I agree with you on Zach Allen on that one. I would, again, pass rush from the inside is good, but I don't want to see him eating up double team and blocks all the time. That's not, you don't need to spend that money on him for that. And coming in from Ecuador, Mandingo Dan, greetings from Ecuador. I think that's cool. Again, as the MHH family likes to say, proving once again that Broncos country is not a geographic location, but a state of being. So Chase Wellner coming in blue says, do you expect a later free agency wave addition to the interior defensive line? Maybe. It's hard to expect something like that. This guy's going to get cut and then the Broncos just sign him. That's a lot that has to happen. But we say all the time, the salary cap moves aren't just in March. They're in August. They're in September. Mm-hmm. So, keep an eye on the waiver wires as teams start cutting down. And you can get good players on the interior line later on for under $2 million. You can. As you start flushing out your roster, you're filling some of those big gaping holes. Now let's get some depth. There's not a ton of holes on this team. And we've preached before that the biggest ones are relatively cheap unless you go spend, $12 million on a guard, which is fine. If he's a $12 million guard and he plays like it, great.
Yeah.
But right now, the biggest hole on this team for me right now, Nick, is right in the middle.
Center.
Yeah. Right in the middle. Those are cheap. Relatively speaking, those are cheap.
Yeah, and
if you can
center,
find them, they might be. It's one of those things where supply and demand. There's not a ton of demand for them, but there's not a bunch of good ones either. But again, because the bar has been set so low, you should be able to improve at center next year, even if it's Lloyd Cushenberry making improvements based on scheme, coaching, and experience. The center position should be better next year. Mark Schrader is always coming in strong for us. Thank you, Mark. Hope you were doing well in Tyler, Texas.
Yes,
he usually gets the weather just about a day before I do, Nick. So how is it over there? How's my weatherman?
Yeah, that's a good one. In language, Nick. Sorry, guys. I just wanted to prove the point of how upsetting it is the Broncos didn't take Tariq Woolen right there. Sorry, but that one's it's frustrating. But
when did you get Mathis?
He was like one of the first 4th round picks.
Okay, so a little earlier, but still good value.
Oh, that's probably one of their best value picks.
Yeah, that's good value. You're not gonna, you can't ace them all.
No,
usually,
But that one was.
Yes, I know a 4'3", 6'3" guy with long arms and production.
What are we doing?
How the hell do you fall to the 5th?
Yeah. Good morning from Sting Guy. Nick just wanting you to slip up one time with a Buckham. Yeah, that's a good one. That's maybe we should do shirts on here. Buck you too. But getting into this a little bit more, you talked about the center position. I think that we're talking about edge. We're talking about defensive line, even the depth of the offensive line. I all have questions about right now. And for those positions, I honestly think you could wait until, like you were talking about earlier, after the draft. You could probably even wait for some of those spots if you felt not great about the depth until after teams go down from 90 to 53. There's going to be, those are positions where you can just add bodies at any point in the season. The scheme is not going to be overly complex, and you're going to be able to add there. And hopefully the is high on quick, Scott. It is.
Yeah, you're freezing up just a little bit, but again, when you go from 95 to 53, you're talking about, there's part of those, it's not really going to because part of that 95 is practice squad guys, so you're really going from 95 to 70. I'm rounding here because you're going to re-sign, most teams re-sign their own practice squad guys. They keep them as part of the 16. So you're really going from 95 to 70, but still 25 times 30, what's that, 700? Am I doing that math right? Somewhere in that neighborhood, 750, 325s would be 70, 750 players NFL players become available on cut down day. So, you want to give yourself some options, and that's where it's nice. And the Broncos have always had that little bit of flexibility with that available cap room in order to do things after cut down day. Talk to somebody about, maybe we make a late round trade for a cap guy. You're going to waive him. We need a right tackle. That's one of the things I've been critical of George Payton about, except the big ones, the big moves, in hindsight, was the not doing more for the right tackle position the last 2 years. Well, in year 3, you've made up for it. And do you overpay because you didn't address it earlier? That's one of the hazards of kicking the can down the road, kind of like the salary cap. We give a big signing bonus, we extend a guy's contract, we restructure, we move that cap number down. Well, it's kind of the same thing if you ignore a position. Instead of investing early when you've got to buy late, I didn't get the bargain shot. I waited till Christmas Eve, and now I'm paying twice as much money. So, you've had to pay for it, then you maybe had to overpay, but it's been done. Guard, right tackle. Now, one more. Get the guy in the middle. Get that center.
And the point I was going to make before my internet dropped for 1 second, and guys, this should be the last episode with this computer. If Chad,
I wouldn't say that. I would expect it to be here on Sunday, Nick.
I mean, it should be here Saturday. That's what.
Good.
That's what it sounds like. But I digress. The point I was going to make is edge rusher, even some of like the tackle depth, tight end, running back, defensive tackle. Those are ones that I think you can probably patch some bottom end of the roster guys after teams go from 90 to 53. At least one of those spots. I don't know if I want that at center, Scott. I think you need to have the center in there ASAP. When the team is meeting, when you're getting the structure down, you're getting the chemistry down, you're getting the line checks down. What are we doing as a unit? That center, I want him to be in there. So that's the one position that I hope they can figure out here soon, sooner than later, because I don't think we have 2 weeks until week 1. Let's bring in our brand new starter at center. That concerns me. I would not be
I
about
agree.
that.
And I've said, I wanted 6 new offensive line in as part of that 95. You've got 2, but you've spent a bunch of money on them. So I'm willing to say 5. Okay, let's bring in another starting caliber center early, like Nick says, so you can start working together and gel and become a starting unit, and then hit the draft. And that's really early for me also. So before the summer, but make sure before OTAs and all that kind of stuff. And then I want 2 developmental prospects, 2 guys in the draft. That would give me 5 new offensive linemen. Could it be done? Could you do that all in one offseason? Yes, you can. Can I then go get a starting edge? Maybe not. But the what was going to help this team the most this year was offensive line, and it's being addressed. It's nice to see. I like I said, it's nice when your team does the obvious. There's a phrase in soccer. It's like sometimes the hardest thing to do is to play simple. Why? I don't know. But sometimes these general managers and these administrators, they get in their own little bubbles, and it's like it's easy. Offensive line. And it's been put off to a certain extent the last couple of years. Sean Payton's coming in, working with George Payton, offensive line this year, folks.
Yeah. And we got Matt Henry coming in saying, good morning, Nick and Scott. Do you guys think they target a corner in the draft or free agency? I think they're still looking at corner for sure. I mean, right now, we'll have to play a game at some point, Scott, where let's say we take away one of the starters. How do we feel about the position? And right now, cornerback is one of them. If you take away, let's leave Surtain off the table. You drop Mathis off there. You're starting Jaquan McMillan for half the season, or Lord knows who, opposite of Patrick Surtain. I mean, that's a big question in the depth of the cornerback room. So cornerback is certainly up there for me. I think it's one that they're targeting in the draft, but we'll see how it plays out for the Broncos. But cornerback is one of the positions with the most concerning depth right now, in my opinion, on this team. So cornerback is way up there for me.
Agree. You can never have enough of them. And a couple things real quick after Matt, he followed that up by saying, good morning, love waking up to Broncos for breakfast. Well, we're glad you're here. Mm-hmm. And then Jesse coming in here. The Titans just released Bud Dupree. What do we think of him as edge? I think every former Titan has first dibs with the Atlanta Falcons. That's what I think so far. The joke that I've been using for the Falcons the last 2 years is, with some available cap money, they won't have to shop off of the Titans and Bears waiver wire list, what they've been doing the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. But Bud Dupree will be 30 years old, started 11 games last year. Let's see, 18 tackles. So it didn't look like, and 4 sacks. So maybe a part-time player if I look at snaps, but a big guy. We talk about, that size on the edge. He's 6'4", 270, Nick. Yeah. Out of Macon, Georgia. So he is a Georgia boy and a Tennessee Titan. Let me see here. Let's see, snap counts. He still played 453. So he wasn't overly productive last year. 453 snaps. So we'll see. Again, a competent professional on the tail end of his career, maybe waning just a little bit. Get him for a price, and he's a good guy to have on your roster.
Yeah, and with where the Broncos are set up at the edge rusher position right now, I think that I could see them going into the season with the bodies they have. Maybe you draft a guy if you like one that falls, but with Randy Gregory's contract, I think he's pretty much the big investment, the onus right now. And Gatorade Gaming saying, Nick, your internet saying, Bucky, it's not the internet, unfortunately. It is the computer itself. Scott and I did the Taskmaster, and we watched it, and it flatlined at 100%, immediately when it was there. So going to have a better
Taskmaster.
CPU.
My doctor here is the big tech guy. I can tell, the Taskmaster. What are you playing, Dungeons and Dragons, man? Come on.
Whatever the hell it is, Scott. I don't know.
Task Manager. You can look at your CPU and your GPU, your graphics card, and look and see how hard they are being, and your RAM, and you look and see how hard they are being taxed. and
100%.
Nick, by opening Notepad, hit 1000%. So, like,
Yeah, and
dude,
it
come on, it's time for a
made the
new
connection
machine.
also. I'm like, I don't know if it's the internet because every time before it happens, I hear the fans kick on my computer. And he's like, uh-oh, that sounds like it's probably something going on in your device. So computer's coming. Thank God. But yeah, no, it's God, the point I was making. I don't even remember.
I don't know. I'll
It's
let you
edge
think
rusher.
about it. Go
Edge
ahead.
rusher is about edge. So I think the Broncos. I think you could go into this season probably with where you're at edge rusher. You have. I mean, let's talk about it. Zach Allen, Randy Gregory, Baron Browning, Nick Benito, Jonathan Cooper. I mean, that's a pretty not talented, overly talented group, and you could obviously add another player. But I think it's really set up where they could be comfortable this season with that. You maybe add in a draft pick, and then next season it's going to be a reevaluation period specifically. Then Baron Browning would only have 1 year of his contract left. Then you also only have one. You can move on from Randy Gregory, and also you have a first round pick back, which a lot of edge rushers are first round pick discussion. So I think it's probably a position that maybe you bring in a veteran for cheap 1 year kind of situation. But I think I see them going other directions with where this roster is set up right now.
Lawrence came in and he's just saying, he's kind of echoing what I said and then throwing a little bit more on that. And that when you have to overpay when you don't invest early, I said that earlier, and I agree, Lawrence, obviously.
Yeah.
I said it earlier too. But then he says also, you don't, it's kind of like getting a used car. You don't know all the kinks in it just yet. I
Right.
don't necessarily want to move into a brand new house. I want to move into a house that's 5 years old, so someone else has already found all the problems in it. So there are some questions in there. And again, I think Jeremy Shawn had said something along the lines in the chat of, you're paying the market value, but it's better than what you've got. So the point is if you get quality, even if you overpay for it, you never regret spending a premium. Not ever. Think about it in your life. Have you ever bought something that you loved and said, I paid too much for that? No. When it becomes too much is when it fails.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you worry about the cost. No one would have mentioned Russell Wilson's contract if he's playing at a Pro Bowl level. No one. It wouldn't have been a problem. So if Mike McGlinchey comes in and plays well, you're not worried about his contract at all.
Yeah.
It's when they start to not. It's still always about the level of play, not necessarily the money. And hopefully you're paying a premium to get quality in those two positions.
Yeah. Without talk about paying a premium, Laura saying, Nick, you get what you pay for. Well, Chad bought me my computer and then I paid for it myself, but he picked it out and sent it to me in September 2019. So hopefully Scott's got this next one for me here coming in here. So I think Chad was just looking for something. I kid you not. My other computer I got in 2008 and I had it until 2019 and it was held together by duct tape at the very end. So no joke.
Well, they put talking to these guys behind the scene, they've put all of the money. I used to get a new computer every 2 years, like clockwork, every 2 years. I had my last one for like 8 years because they've put all the money in processing, the upgrades in processing and GPU and cameras into these things. This is where all the advancement is gone. So, they kind of hit peak processor. Anyway, we can talk about that stuff later. The fact is Nick's getting a computer that is literally 10 times more powerful than what he's got now, and it should be here next week.
Thank God. Talking about more
bucks, so like, again, you want to talk cars, computers, I'm your guy. I don't know anything about football.
If you want to find a curated trail for hiking or backpacking, I'm your guy too. It was my wife's birthday yesterday, and I surprised her with permits to do the High Sierra Trail, which is a 75-mile trail. We're going to be starting, and we're going to climb the West Divide down in the High Sierras in California and end by summiting Mount Whitney. So that's going to be pretty amazing. The end of August. So there you go, Scott. I'm going to be gone the end of August. Good luck to you. But Tyler Brooks, Broncos versus Falcons Super Bowl rematch on the way. That would be pretty fun.
Rematch. I don't remember them playing.
Ha ha ha. Well, I can send you some highlights there, Scott, on my new computer.
I was 25 in 98, and so I would have been 26 because my birthday is January 3rd. So if I don't ever have to think how old was I when that happened, it's just whatever year it was. So you would have played that in 1999. At the time, I said basically our entire goal as an Atlanta Falcons fan in our existence has been not to be embarrassed. It's like we made it 364 days that year. And then Eugene Robinson, our Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, goes out and gets arrested for solicitation the night before the game. And then you get blown out because everybody's been out partying in Miami. Nice. That was such a good team too, though. I would have that would have been such an epic game. Talking about I feel cheated again. That one's getting blown up by Chiefs fans on my Facebook page because I felt like the ending cheated us all, including Chiefs fans. I felt cheated out of that game. It would have been such a great game if the Falcons had bothered to show up. I'm not saying they would have won by any stretch, but that Falcons team was freaking good. They were top 5 in offense and defense that year, maybe 6. And just, hey, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
14-2. I mean, they weren't a fluke. They were good. Yeah,
I don't want to age you
after that game.
I don't want to age you at all. I don't want to say how young I was during that Super Bowl 33, but I do remember it. I remember watching it on VHS tapes, staying home from summer vacation. But Lawrence, Scott, go ahead. I'm freezing here.
Yeah, I know. Lawrence comes in. Thank you, Lawrence. Says, you guys kick butt, been busy with life, but much love, Broncos fans. Priorities, dude. So you take care of yours. We'll be here. We'll be here when you come back. So certainly appreciate it.
So we probably should get into the main topic here, Scott. So a lot of rumors circling. We've heard it now. First, it was a lot of Courtland Sutton talk. First person to really throw that name out there was Lindsey Jones of the Athletics. I scooped that on a athletic interview and I wrote it up and it was like, what? Nobody's saying this. I'm like, here's the link. You can take it up with Lindsey Jones, who is a phenomenal NFL reporter. Been doing it for years. Nothing but respect for her, but not to dump it on her. But, she said it out there, so I wrote it up. And then you had Barry, longtime fantasy guy, to talk about 30 things he heard from the NFL Combine, and Courtland Sutton's name was one of those bullet points on there about being shopped. Now you have Albright's been banging that drum now for a couple of weeks, and Mike Garofalo has mentioned it now, a couple other NFL reporters. So there's a lot out there, more than smoke, about the Broncos shopping, listening to offers for Courtland Sutton. I feel like it's gone from we're listening to we are full on shopping, though. It really feels like the Broncos are pushing for this change. I don't know if it's about salary cap or creating salary cap room. I don't know if it's about adding additional picks for the draft, but I feel like it's gone from, maybe we would, to we want to move on from these guys. And that's just a gut feeling I have.
And like I said, I just feel like with Sutton, just because of the contract and because it would be so much more beneficial to move on from him next year, that if you want to move on for him, it's 2 words that we've talked about a lot with some of these guys. You may have gotten a like for Zach Gallen and Draymond Jones. You may not get an equivalent player back for Courtland Sutton. So what are you looking for here? Culture change. It's culture change. That's what you're looking at if you're moving on from Courtland Sutton for one reason or another. If he doesn't want to be there, or they're not sold on the way he has conducting himself in Dove Valley, that's the only thing that makes any sense to me at all for this year, because he's better than a 3rd round pick, and you don't get enough money back in free agency in order to do something to get an equivalent player. He's better than that. So something is up. If you are shopping him, we'll see. If they say, okay, if you trade Courtland Sutton for a 3rd round pick, I'm going to be disappointed. I will be. I just don't think I think you're much better off with Courtland Sutton for one more year to see what happens. And that's for me as a football outsider here, as a Broncos outsider looking in. I don't know what's going on in that locker room. If he is causing a problem for one reason or another, and I'm not saying he is, then that changes the dynamic. I want out. I want to move. Okay, well, that changes the dynamic completely. And that's the only thing that makes sense to me, Nick.
Everything that I understand, and again, I'm not in that locker room, but I do have people that I talk with that are in that locker room, is that Courtland Sutton is an A-plus character, well-spoken, intelligent person, and not a problem in any way. The only thing from a interpersonal, and this is just me speculating, I want to add that in there, but the only thing I can think of from an interpersonal thing is that maybe he just doesn't have that bite to him. Maybe he's too nice almost for that, what you're going for on the offensive side, because they're looking for butt kickers out there. They signed mean dudes this offseason, real just physical players. And Sutton can be physical, but I always feel like, he's kind of a nice guy out there as well. So, and they keep hyping up Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick plays mean out there. And I just don't.
And Jerry Jeudy, we know, is kind of, he's got a little bit of an edge to him too. He's got that little man's disease where he's like the Chihuahua out there barking at, 190 pounds, but he's out there, stirring it up. I don't care. That's fine. Sutton can be a 3. Well, we're paying too much for a 3, but you don't get the money back.
Yeah.
That's my point. Is
Mm.
it's one more year for Sutton, and then you can really get the benefits. And if you're talking about, okay, he didn't have a great year. He didn't have a bad year either. He was an 800-yard wide receiver.
Mhm.
Is he? And that's missing the middle part of the year when he disappeared. He was on pace. I think he had 360 yards in the first 4 games or something, and then all of a sudden it just disappears. So
Yeah.
again, I'll say it 20 times, then I'll stop. One more year for Courtland Sutton, unless you can get something better than a third.
I'm at this point, I'm in the what's the bargaining process of grieving for that one, because I feel like I'm like, before I was like, oh, you need probably a top 60 pick. Now I'm in like top 75, top 80, because I'm hearing an assortment of day 3 picks, which is like, what? And we have Fallen Angels coming in here saying trade Sutton for a center. You don't typically see a player for player trade, just how the contracts kind of offset, but trading Sutton could create cap space where that then you could pay for a center. So in which way that could go.
Or move up enough where you could get one of the top 2 or 3 centers in the draft. And
Yes.
if I had John Michael Schmitz, if I had Joe Tippmann,
Steve Avila.
Avila maybe. If I had, who's the Ohio State guy? I think you like Luke Whippler.
Yep.
One of those 3 guys. Those guys could be plug and plays, but it's going to take above a 50 to get one of those guys, Nick.
Oh, they're not all going to go above 50. I would be shocked if that was the case. I bet you one of those guys.
One of them should be available at 50. But again, that's second round.
Yeah.
I'm not giving this guy up for a third. I'm not.
Yeah. If the third you got, you could then probably package both of your thirds to move up for a player that you identify. I would be against that personally. I think that we've talked about on here before, the bias of you're oversure about your own analysis, where it's better to take those 2 picks, 10 picks later than 1 pick earlier. But yeah, we'll see how it plays out with Courtland Sutton. They keep people in the Broncos. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I keep seeing the narrative push that like, oh, you already have Tim Patrick here. It's redundancy. Well, we saw the injuries happen. Redundancy is not bad if they're good players.
You
right?
need all the redundancy you can get if you're the Denver Broncos right now, until you prove that these guys. You're hoping that it's Ben Lowry, and his staff can come in, and Dalrymple can come in and wipe away some of the missed games with injury. But there's no guarantee what you're going to get back from Tim Patrick. We saw it took a year for Courtland Sutton. For a skill player, it's typically 18 months before you are truly 100%. You don't have to be 100% to be out there and play. But I don't know. If we're going to go out there and bully a bunch of guys, maybe I don't need as many wide receivers. It's part of it. You're going to go out there and run 53% of the time, like the Ravens or the Falcons or somebody like that. Then maybe I don't need the receivers, but I need at least 3 for God's sakes.
Yeah. And that's the other thing with this conversation, is that maybe the Broncos are looking to de-emphasize how they're spending on the wide receiver position and instead looking to play matchup football. I think Sean Payton, with the way they've invested in the run game, maybe he believes that as long as I can out talent people in the run game, I can out scheme people in the pass game. You get me smart guys, guys who have specific skill sets that I'm not paying as much for, and I can use my scheme, my matchup style scheme, and get them open where I'm not having to pay as much for the talent at the wide receiver. So we'll see how it plays out. I know they keep emphasizing speed. They keep talking about Tim Patrick being redundant, or Courtland Sutton being redundant with Tim Patrick. So we'll see how it plays out. I think if the Broncos do trade a Courtland Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy, they turn around and trade a lower pick to bring in Brandon Cooks. Because they keep talking about speed. He's on the market. They've been making, goo eyes, batting their lashes at each other through social media, it seems like. So that's something you could see as well. Gatorade Gaming coming in and say, did the Saints ever have 3 really good wide receivers? The thing is, they had good weapons, but they weren't necessarily wide receivers, right? You had the Jimmy Graham, you had Marcus Colston, you had Michael Thomas for a number of years, Alvin Kamara, Darren Sproles. They were able to find weapons, but it never was like an onslaught of wide receiver talent.
Well, and my point would probably be most teams, very few teams ever have 3 really good wide receivers. Yeah. Most of them would have maybe a true number 1, and then another good one, and then role playing guys that rotate in and out year to year that you're paying because this guy had a good year and he's going to get too much to be a 3 again. But what they did have was, again, they use their backs incredibly well. Alvin Kamara's leading the team in reception several times. And Michael Thomas was one of the best 2 or 3 wide receivers for a couple years in the NFL. And what did he have in 2019? Let me scroll back 1 year here for the Saints. Previous season in 2019, Michael Thomas rushing and receiving yards. He had 1725 yards. That's 2 receivers for the Broncos right now. So they had Michael Thomas, backs, tight ends, and lots of people. Most people don't have 3 really good wide receivers. Most don't.
Yeah.
But the Broncos don't have a Michael Thomas right now either. They don't have the offensive weapons. And if Sutton can be a plus wide receiver, again, you can't just give him up for a 3rd round pick, because you don't get the benefits from moving him other than the 3rd round pick. It's more beneficial next year. 1 more year.
I agree. It's the same conversation with Garrett Bowles. Also, the contract with him, maybe you could salvage him and play better and then move on from him. But we'll see. God, there's so much smoke. And then talking about Jerry Jeudy as well. The one thing I come into, so the Broncos, I saw it in the chat earlier. We haven't talked about it at all, but the Broncos apparently were very aggressively pursuing Allen Lazard, who ends up picking the Jets instead. But Allen Lazard, a little bit of an inside-outside wide receiver, a tweener somewhat, because he's kind of got a big tight end, or a small tight end body, big wide receiver body. And that dude is a butt kicker as a blocker. I'm not going to cuss again on here, but he's physical. And if you want to run out of 11 personnel, he's somebody who can, take on a linebacker at that second level and, more than just get in the way. And that's something where, okay, moving on from Jeudy specifically, what's every single move the Broncos have made on the offensive side of the ball pointed to? Physicality and blocking and tenacity in the run game. Jeudy doesn't bring that. It's been one of the big reasons that I was against him from playing the slot, because he's, Olay against some of those guys trying to block and get in the way for that level. But you have a point, Scott. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I do like, though, is we talk about the cycle of this going through, okay? And having his skill set when a team has to go big to load up against my power, and having his skill set would change the direction, that's a nice weapon to have out there. If I'm going to run it at you and you're going to have to go big to stop me, now I've got one guy out there that you can't catch. That's a nice diverse attack. He's got a skill set out there at wide receiver he's the only one that brings that skill set for me. But Fantasy Football Garage asked a great question. Is there any excitement for Greg Dulcich in year 2 or Albert O? Definitely more Greg Dulcich than Albert O. There's hope for Albert O that he can be better. But even in his breakout game, he really looked like he was struggling to catch the ball. He just got schemed wide open, and he's big and fast. It's strange because he was really productive at Missouri, but he looked uncomfortable out there, and he's not a great blocker. And we've just got done talking about having these more powerful, more mean guys that aren't going to get bullied out there. So you bring in a guy like Manhurts. I think that's where you're going to miss Albert O, is Manhurts is going to take his spots. But Greg Dulcich could be a star in this offense. Absolutely could be a star. There should be very big excitement for Greg Dulcich, and it wouldn't totally surprise me if he's one of your top 2 leading receivers, either in catches or yards next year.
Scott, are you a poker player at all? You ever play poker?
I'm not, because I'm too honest.
Okay. I don't have the patience. I'll play 2.
And I'm unlucky. I can't do it. When I win is in high lows. Okay. If I can win by having the worst hand, that's when I win.
Okay. All right. I feel that. So Alberto Cuebanam on the field is the equivalent of playing, classic 5-card poker, and you are showing 2 of your cards to the opponents the whole time. I think last year in the first 4 games, the Broncos were 100% passing when Alberto Cuebanam was on the field, and you don't know what the play design is going to be. So it's not, fully showing your hand. It's not like you're letting somebody in the huddle and they know the designer, they're screen peeking and Madden and see which play you pick. But he's a not a tendency breaker, but he's a giveaway out there for your offensive scheme, at least last season, because he was that bad as a run blocker. They said, you know what, we would rather them know that we're going to pass the ball with him on the field than have him even run block, because it's an automatic L. So I don't know about the likes of Alberto Cuebanam making this team. I guess there's a chance he could break out because he's still here, right? And as much as anybody on the roster right now, just like KJ Hamler could break out because he's still here. But to me, he's somebody who doesn't factor at all in how I envision this team. And if you get anything from him, gotta play this one back and make me look like a fool, because I would be ecstatic for him. I don't think he's a bad
Sure.
dude or anything. I'm pulling for him, but I don't know if that would happen.
Yeah, I'd love to be wrong on these guys.
Yes,
That's fine. I mean,
that'd be great.
no problem there. Lou 101 says, "I'm not surprised Sutton lost some motivation last season when there were games where he was getting 2 or 3 targets all game." You can basically just take that first sentence and switch in any first part of that sentence and just switch in anybody's name on offense. I'm not surprised blank lost motivation last year because it was such a freaking disaster
Yeah.
across the board on offense. Who's in charge? This guy's up here, smiling and saying we got to do better, and this guy's up here smiling and say we got to protect Russ. And we don't even know what's going on in the background, but some of the stuff you hear is just ridiculous. I'm not surprised anyone lost some motivation last year on offense. I'm surprised the defense played as well as they did for as long as they did, considering how historically bad and dysfunctional the offense was. It's one of the reasons Ejiro Evero was seen as such a hot candidate last year, was because of what a disaster the other side of the ball was, which included your head coach. So, Lou, I agree with you 100%, but put in anybody's name. I'm willing to give them all a free pass on, well, he didn't look like he was giving his all. I know they're professionals. I know, don't get me wrong. They're getting paid to give it their best, but this is such a fine margins game. If you're at 100%, if you're at 98%, you can tell a difference. There's such a fine margin between the home crowd being behind you and having the momentum and going on the road. There's just fine margins. And if you lose a little bit of that during the course of the season because you've lost belief in your coach and your coaching staff, it's visible. And I'm willing to give these guys a pass for last year, Lou.
Yeah, we need a lot of more football on Pro Saturdays and talk about the Bills. Then everybody talking about the Bills. Like, why are you talking about the Bills? It's a Broncos show. I will say, need a lot. If you give a super chat, we will talk about the Bills on here, even though it's a Broncos show. But Wednesdays,
Yeah, but he
Wednesdays.
asks us, is Jeudy good? Bills could give you a third, sure, or we'll just trade Jeudy for Allen straight up. I mean, come on, let's be serious. You're not getting a third for Jeudy.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably talking about the Bills' first round pick if you're doing that, considering how late it is. Broncos are probably looking for a pick in that 20 to 35 range, I think is what you're expecting for Jerry Jeudy. And Judy's a very good player. He's a niche player, though. He's an amazing route runner, good yak in terms of making guys miss, can be good off the line of scrimmage, can be good vertical, really wiry. Somebody said, why can't Jerry Jeudy play the Michael Thomas role? Michael Thomas was like 70% in his career in contested catches, and Jerry Judy's like 35% in contested catches in his career. Just totally different skill set. Now, part of that, there are variables that feed into that. Jeudy is so good at getting open that there are less contested catch opportunities for him. Broncos have had ball in tight windows, so yeah.
Michael Thomas in my scouting career, and I think I've told him this because he was out in California when I was out in California, so we met a bunch of times. He was a 6'4'7" Keyshawn Johnson's nephew is the only reason anybody's paying attention to him, wide receiver. He was so when I think of who did I miss on guys that I didn't think were going to be anybody that I really knew about, Michael Thomas fit that bill. He goes to Fork Union for a year, a post-grad year, and he grows 4 inches and puts on 25 pounds at 18 years old. Man, I was full height at 15. And he became a beast. So he learned how to play. He was a good receiver, a good high school receiver at 6 foot. And then all of a sudden he's 6'4", 225 pounds with all of that same guile that he had to have in order to get. So Michael Thomas was a different type of guy. The closest one you have to that would be a Sutton or a Patrick, but Michael Thomas is bigger and stronger. He's a different guy. I mean, he had 1,800 yards receiving. He's pretty special. Pretty special to us. In our hearts, near and dear to our hearts, is Ethan, the DWI guys coming in from across the pond. He says, "Great show, gents and Broncos country. That's all of y'all who helped make this show so much fun to do. Thoughts if both Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton are traded? Woo! What if they got rid of both of them, Nick? We're running a wishbone, dude. You better bring in some more running backs."
If that happens, you are trading for, I think you're trading for Brandon Cooks. You're probably signing somebody and you're drafting somebody early. You're going to completely revamp the room in that case. You look at Sean Payton's last few years in New Orleans, they really didn't have a lot of wide receiver talent out there on the boundary. You had Michael Thomas, but after that, it was like Marquez Callaway out there and a bunch of names that, really didn't stand out. They're getting by with the dominant trenches, getting the running back and the tight end involved, and then speed receiver in a slot, working through the slot. So I could see it happening. Honest to God, it seems like there's some smoke there for that. You could completely reset the room. Broncos already look like they're trying to almost reshape the offense overnight. The only piece that they for sure can't do it overnight is the quarterback, given the contract, but you might be 1 year off of that. So it could happen. You'd have to bring in talent elsewhere. A name that keeps being brought to, I think we need to keep an eye on for the Broncos is Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati in the draft. He's a name that's been thrown around multiple times. So watch out for him. If you want to go check out some fun highlights, you can watch Tyler Scott. He did some fun stuff 2 years ago with Desmond Ridder. I'm sure if you guys watched Desmond Ridder last year, you noticed Tyler Scott. But it could happen for the Broncos trade in Jeudy and Sutton. Looking to revamp the room, looking to change the dynamic and culture, and just a bunch of different people in that offensive room too, different voices.
And that's, again, culture change. If that happens, that's what it's all about. I said 1 year and a nuke button. Okay, we didn't last 1 year. We lasted one off season and a nuke button. Really, I mean, you're really changing the offensive line. I mean, the offense period. If you're doing that, so oh God, that would be shocking to me. Ethan. That would be shocking to me. Looking at the New Orleans Saints again, we talk about Michael Thomas. We've talked about him being just a different guy. But I scroll back to 2018 Saints. Michael Thomas, 125 catches. Alvin Kamara, running back, 81 catches. Next in line, Ben Watson, tight end, 35 catches. So, and they threw for 4,000 yards that year. They're not about, again, I can't emphasize this enough. The running backs and tight ends play such a role in a Sean Payton offense with Drew Brees at the helm that it's a lot of short passing and then a big shot with a guy down the line. Does Courtland Sutton fit that bill? The underneath stuff with Jerry Jeudy. Greg Dulcich could be a star in this offense. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I said that last year, and boy, did I eat those words. I have a lot more faith in Sean Payton than my blind faith in what Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett would accomplish together.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's me just changing over time or just the game and where the game is at right now and looking for market deficiencies to take advantage of, or the Sean Payton offense. But let's say the Broncos do trade Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. They get a pick early. I know we're still looking for center Scott, but let's say they get the equivalent of the 35th overall pick somehow in some way. I am very interested in Jahmyr Gibbs for this offense with Sean Payton. If you haven't watched him yet, he's a little bit wiry, but he is an unbelievable pass catcher out of the backfield, can line up in the slot, can do stuff behind the line of scrimmage after the catch, or can be flexed out and used vertically, horizontally. Jahmyr Gibbs, Alabama, transferred from Georgia Tech. He was their number one ball carrier in Alabama last season in terms of touches, and he would be unbelievable. I think if you're looking for somebody to funnel targets to from the running back position, Bijan Robinson's your classic, number one, can do everything, should go before Gibbs. But Gibbs is a niche player that in this offense, I think would be unbelievable. He's like the ideal target to cherry on top. And again, it's a running back, but taking a running back early second round where you're not burning that fifth round option on them, you're essentially using the tag on that, which is what teams are doing anyway. That's the area the elite running back should go, in my opinion, with how the draft is set up right now. So
you got 5 years plus a double tag, and you're under 15 million. If he ends up being that guy, he'd be worth it.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see though, because Gatorade Gaming comes and he says, Albright says, we got to get out of here, y'all. We're over an hour already, so we got just a minute or two. If you got any last minute burning questions, Albright says not to be surprised if Court and Jeudy both get traded. Well, sorry, I can't help it. It'd be a reaction. If they both get traded, I'll still be surprised. Even though I've been warned, I'll still be surprised. I'm still surprised when these quarterbacks are getting $40+ million on every new contract, and it keeps happening. So maybe I should stop being surprised. But if they both go, I will be surprised, flat out.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that we have a coherent show when I'm waking up after daylight savings time at 6:30 and 6 a.m. So thank you guys for hanging out with us. Michael coming in, great show. Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos and buck 'em. Buck you too. We got to get on out of here before the internet or my computer crashes. But hopefully the last show with this. I'll have to bother chat again about that. But make sure you guys are following us on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Nick Kendell, MHH. Also, make sure you're following us at BFB_pod, as well as at Mile High Huddle over on Twitter. If you haven't done so yet, join us on Facebook. Big lot of Facebook community on there. We stream out to Facebook. You guys can join us on Facebook if you're on YouTube, or just look for content. Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. Also on the Instagram, guys, we're not Are we on TikTok?
We are.
We are on TikTok too. God, I don't even know.
It's probably Mile High Huddle _ or something along those lines, but we are on TikTok as well.
Man, China's taking our data. They
want
all our Broncos
Mile
takes.
High Huddle is everywhere.
We are. Yeah, we had Perth, Australia today. Ethan across the pond.
Ecuador.
Yeah, coming in. It's great.
Cambodia. I think. Did we see Peter in here?
I didn't see Peter today. I haven't seen Peter in a second.
I saw Peter. We haven't seen Peter in a while, but I think I saw Peter. So that's Cambodia.
Yeah. But the Instagram, Mile_High_Huddle. If you haven't done so yet, follow us on Apple Podcasts. I saw the one yesterday. Nick needs internet fix. It's not the internet, it's the computer. But appreciate all the 5 stars coming in with the digs. You can dig at me. I don't care as long as it's 5 stars. We'll do that. We appreciate that. And as the ticker says underneath there, if you're joining us on YouTube today, please subscribe, like, and share over on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so that way you know when we go live. Scott and I are pretty consistent, 5-minute air bar there, but sometimes things happen. So make sure you have that bell so that way you know when we go live. If not, though, you can join anyway. The chat's already made. You guys can come in and ask your questions. I like to say hello to you people. So appreciate you, Scott. Any plan? You people, all you people.
All y'all.
But all y'all, the folks. Folks is a great word. But Scott, plans weekend. What's going on? You're trying to catch up from all the free agency craziness?
Oh no, it's going to be lots of kids sports. You know how it goes. So it's going to be cold. So I got a 9 a.m. baseball game with an 8 o'clock show up time, which means we got to leave about 7, and it's supposed to be in the 20s maybe. Baseball's no fun in 30-degree weather. Soccer at 1, and then back to baseball at 5. And that's just the boy. The girl's got a doubleheader on Sunday and a game on Saturday. So it'll be fun. I'll keep up with this. And I always say I'm only this far away from my office anyway. So
you need that so that way Nick can send you tweets that are relevant to Falcons and Broncos. Constantly your DMs buzzing. Who is it? Oh, it's just Nick. You cheating on me? No, Nick's just tweeting me. But we appreciate you guys coming.
What's you wearing? Khakis.
Yeah, no, it's sweatpants. For sure, sweatpants. I get it, the reference there. But thank you guys so much. Hope you're doing well. Heath Holmes checking in while you're late. Curious to think about Lamar's contract. He wanted more guaranteed. So that's pretty much it. But we got to get going. If you guys need anything else, you have any other questions, hit us up on Twitter. Daniel joined us with a big super today as well over stars on Facebook. So thank you, Daniel. Thanks, everybody. Ethan coming in. You guys have a great weekend. Continue to choose kindness and compassion. Maybe the Broncos have some more moves in them. We'll see. But until then, go Broncos and buck 'em.